our colleague, the 88th Governor of the State of Connecticut, Daniel Patrick Malloy.
Hey, it's great to be with you. Sit down. I've said this before. Doesn't every governor come to this meeting? It's great. It's great to be with everyone. I want to say how proud I am to be with you today. As somebody who did what so many of you are doing now for 14 years in the city of Stamford, I'm very proud to be in any room with first selectmen or mayors who are delivering the level of services that you all are charged with delivering. I think, and I've said this before, I think municipal government is the most reformed level of government in the United States, vastly surpassing the level of reformation and consolidation in state government and certainly in the federal government as well. I think where the rubber hits the road has responded far more quickly in many cases than the rest of us now, I can say the rest of us, in other levels of government. I know how tough this has been for everybody. It would be nice to create efficiencies in wonderful times, but it's a necessity to create efficiencies in these difficult times. On the other hand, I would also say to you that we've got to be careful about what we do. Let's not overdo. Let's not needlessly increase unemployment rates. So you've got the job of balancing how much you cut from your budget, how many employees you keep versus how many you put on the streets, and what the appropriate level of funding to be required from your constituents is. In that, I would also say to you that we have an important job in government, and that is to have people understand, therefore we have to explain to them, why a great school system is important, or why a great police department is important, or why a great fire department or departments are important, or why it's important to make sure that our transportation infrastructure within our communities meets the needs of our community, or why it's necessary to have a great health department and inspect those restaurants, or to provide appropriate services. All of that is part of our job, and I think in these times when we're all under so much pressure, and when we live in an anti-tax society, we sometimes put on the side our role as advocates for our communities. And what I would caution you is that we need to be reminded that we are advocates for appropriate levels of service. And somebody's got to push back once in a while. Somebody's got to have people confront the reality that everybody wants to cut taxes. They just want you to do it without cutting services. And that there isn't the level of waste in local government or in any government that would allow us to just solve all of our problems overnight by finding that waste. I mean, I'll give you my situation when I became governor of the state of Connecticut and was elected in November, and Jody Rell's people hand me a budget on November 15th according to state statute, and it's $3.5 billion out of balance, representing 18% of total revenue, and that's for a same services budget. So I've done what you all had to do this year, but I did choose a different path than any of the governors that any of you have worked with. And that is that I did not attempt out of the box to balance this budget on your backs. And moved substantially beyond that to create vehicles for additional revenue sources for all of the communities represented here. It may not be a gigantic step, but it is a first step to what needs to be a diversification of a supply of revenue to local governments, and I'm proud to do that. I said I was going to do both of those things, and in fact I did it. But the story of the budget is that, having been handed that document and having to come up with a budget, we took a different course than many other states have taken. We decided to trim expenditures within that budget by about $800 million. We decided to ask our employee groups for concessions that would allow us to maintain each employee in their job, but it would allow us also to restack our long-term relationship with those employees, which had been unfunded or underfunded for a long period of time. And then finally, we went to the public and said, this problem is too big to cut our way out of it. It's too big to tax our way out of it. Therefore, we need some revenue as well. I think we struck the right balance. I know that not everyone agrees with that in the state or in the room, but I think the wisdom of doing what we're doing and making appropriate investments in infrastructure is going to, in the long run, pay off and inure to the benefit of the state of Connecticut. That's the plan. It would have been easy not to fill that ECS gap. And quite frankly, it would have been just as easy to throw on another $250 million to that gap. So instead of a $270 million problem, we would only had a $530 million problem. That would have been easy to do, but it wouldn't have been right in a state that's more dependent on property taxes than any other state in the nation for local revenue. It would have been easy not to create that 1/10 of 1 penny sales tax, but I would not have kept my promise to seek to diversify revenue sources for local governments. It would be easy not to fund so many of the programs that so many of you rely on for some portion of the funding for your educational systems beyond the ECS formula, but it would have been wrong to do. So we did take a different course, and I'm proud that we did, and again, I believe in the long run it will inure to our benefit. A couple of other things that I want you to understand my administration is trying to do with all of you, and that is to have a better relationship. In Ben Barnes at OPM, a guy who used to work for this organization, and then came to work for me for 10 years in the city of Stamford, understands local government and actually has had exposure, and I might call it that, to the educational side as well, because the job between the time that I ended up being mayor and his accepting his position with me in state government as the secretary of OPM, he actually spent in Bridgeport helping their educational system. So he's a guy who I think you can reach out to and expect, and I know that your leadership does reach out to, and expect to have a relationship with. But I also want you to know that we're trying to change the whole relationship. So it's not just with OPM, but it's on the jobs front with Catherine Smith, who's the new DECD director, who's going to build a very different organization than the one that I was used to over the 14 years that I was mayor, that basically ignored local government until the very end, and quite frankly, if you weren't in the right party, it ignored you even after the end. So we want to have a cooperative venture with building jobs and adding jobs to the communities that want to work with us. I can tell you that it goes every step. Every commissioner is particularly attuned to the fact that I'm a former mayor and that I believe we have to have a different relationship with 169 municipalities as well as all of the boards of education in the state. Now, we would like to see more cooperation in the sense of local communities doing together on a voluntary basis that which they can do together. I think it is an area where we can identify further efficiencies in local government, but I reject the concept of requiring you to do that. I just think we need to encourage you to do that whenever possible. And that's part of the bully pulpit of explaining to people that when local governments decide to do things together, they're actually saving money as opposed to spending more money. And we've got to kind of work people through the idea that doing things cooperatively, it doesn't necessarily mean you're giving up authority. It means that you've decided to have more people at the table to make the final decision. That's all. It's not giving up authority. So I think that we need to be reminded if any of my commissioners or the people in state government aren't being as cooperative with this organization or with you as individual leaders of your communities, we want to hear about it, but we very definitely want to have a new and better relationship. One other thing I want to touch on, and then I'll take some questions, which I was asked to do, and more than happy to have that dialogue. On the capital side, the state bonding side, we have been aggressive in bonding projects that are ready to go, and we will resist bonding projects that aren't ready to go. So the old concept of parking money aside, year after year, waiting till the appropriate amount of money was reached and the project could go forward, I reject that. I just want to be clear. So if you're looking if your state representative or state senator has gotten you on a list to have some project funded, one of the measurements is if we put money into it in a particular month's agenda, is it actually going to be spent in a very short period of time? And those are the projects that will be funded, and I'll just warn you that others won't be, because I'm trying to put people back to work. And I'm trying to get this infrastructure recreated. So with that note, I'd be happy to talk to anybody, answer any questions. Mary, congratulations, and all of your leadership, congratulations on what I think was a pretty good session for you all. Honestly. Actually, I should take this on right before I take any questions. I know there's a lot of angst. I have some level of angst about what the unions are going to do with respect to this agreement, because this agreement with restacking our relationship on a sustainable basis has to be approved by the unions. Most of the unions thus far have supported it. AFSCME is a big organization, so all the locals within that work a little bit differently. Most of them have approved it. I think maybe one or two have not, but it seems to be moving in the right direction. I know you're going to say, well, what happens if they don't approve it? Well, I'll tell you that we will begin making the layoffs pretty quickly. And I would expect that number on the state side would grow over the next 2 years to be about 7,500 employees. I will keep in mind municipalities when we restack the budget, as we would be required to do in the absence of that agreement. I can't make you any guarantees at the moment, because a lot of it will depend on where we are, what our notification requirements are, and how much money we're going to have to find beyond the severance of our employees. So with that, I'd be happy to take some questions.